Well, welcome to this morning's induction in relation to the Economic Growth and Prosperity Group of Services. I'm Andy Evans, I'm the head of service. The service managers are sitting over to my right, and it's their duty to lead on each of their items. This morning is much about you getting to know the faces as much as what we do as well. So you've got then the identities that you need to go to speak to about certain things, and you need to drill down, etc. Good morning. We are quite a diverse range of services, and you'll see that from this morning's presentation. We range from dealing with major infrastructure projects through to dealing with frogs and logs, bats and newts, and with Peter pantomime dames. So you'll hear more about those later. Today we're going to talk about economic growth, which is one of the Council's key priorities. We talk about in terms of driving forward economic growth, how we use the environment, culture, heritage to drive forward growth of Shropshire. And it's about making Shropshire a place to live, work, play and visit. So those are the key areas. Each service manager is going to touch on theirs. They've only got 10 minutes, because we haven't got a lot of time, and we've got 7 areas to cover. So we'll cover those 10-minute presentations, and then if you could keep questions to the end, so we can keep some form and some I know it's going to be difficult, Tina, if you would, bear with us. And I know Tina and Steve might be testing us as we go through, but if you keep your questions to the end, that would be really good. So if I can cover the first area, which is the major projects in terms of infrastructure and growth. Now these are the ones that really set major building blocks for the Council. These are the ones we deliver in partnership. So just to give you a feel for some of these, the Riverside is the main retail scheme in the centre of Shrewsbury. It's valued, the range of values from 150 million up to 184 million. It's a significant step change in terms of the retail offer in the town centre. And it's a scheme that will be anchored by a Devlin store with a range of other stores surrounding it. At the moment, the scheme itself has been reviewed in light of market conditions, and the developers are working on some viabilities of new proposals at the moment. Sustainable urban extensions, those are 3 in total, and they've been pushed forward in terms of the local development plan. We have Shrewsbury South, Shrewsbury West, and another sustainable urban extension at Oswald Street, and they are major retail-led developments. And have, again, worked in partnership with developers. Flaxmill, I hope everybody's aware of Flaxmill. If you're not, where have you been for the last 10 years or so? That's a partnership development with English Heritage, £25 million scheme, funding from English Heritage, Heritage Lottery Fund, and Europe, ourselves through Growth Point, and English Heritage themselves, I mentioned. And the Homes and Communities Agency. So quite a range of funding bodies, quite a cocktail of funding, and quite a difficult, challenging project to manage, not only in terms of the listed nature of the building, the historic importance, but actually all those funding bodies and funding streams as well. So quite technically complicated, but financially complex as well. I'm sure Mark might touch on that project as well. And finally, in terms of infrastructure and growth, broadband. Now, when we speak to companies and communities, the one thing that's on the top of the list every time in terms of economic competitiveness is broadband. Improve broadband, improve broadband. That's a key message that comes forward all the way. Now, I'll touch on broadband. Chris Taylor is the project manager for Connecting Shropshire. Unfortunately, he's in a meeting at the moment, but he will love to join us later for the questions section. Again, working in partnership. This is a £24 million project funded jointly from BD UK, BT as the developer, and ourselves in terms of our contribution of 8 million or thereabouts. Some of the key messages in terms of the programme. We started in March 2013, as I said, £24 million programme. We've gone live just last month in terms of announcing the first communities that will access the changes. While we're covering 93% of the county, the focus from commentators is on the 7% that we're not covering rather than the 93% that we are covering. And I'll say a bit more about that shortly. The challenge has been, if you look at this map, the red areas are areas that are classified by British Telecom BT as being rural or extremely rural. And that's where the challenge lies, accessing those rural areas, many of these. And I know Tina and Steve are aware of the issues in those rural areas, but we'll say a bit more about that shortly as well. It is an incredibly challenging project in terms of stopping up roads, the kind of cable that goes in there. But the bit that carries all that information are those fine threads of fibre. So if you think the millions and millions and millions of pieces of information that are travelling around the world, they're going through those fibres. I think there's Steve there inspecting one of the sites that's being developed. But again, these are the challenges we've got, getting the broadband out to these areas. What you'll see in terms of changes on the ground, though, is the old cases, and you'll see a new case just like that, as close to the old one as possible. So in terms of physical change on the ground after the work's been done, that's the only difference you're going to see. This is the map that's on the website in terms of deployment. Again, grey area, that's the commercial rollout, dark green, and then the lighter green are the next phases. When you get into these very light areas, those are the real areas of challenge. And we're working with communities at the moment. We've got 24 million. It's not enough to take us up to 100%. Now, how do we plug that gap? That's the challenge we've got to the future. And you'll hear this in terms of the presentations this morning. We'll talk about, each of the service managers will talk about what are we doing now, and also what are the challenges we're facing as an organisation moving forward. Frequently asked questions, but I won't go through those, but they're really about, am I in, am I going to benefit, etc. What are you going to do about the bits that we can't access at the moment? In terms of keeping the communities informed, this is important for yourselves in talking to your communities. There is a website. If you go on and put your postcode in that little box, it'll tell you where you're up to. If you're not in the rollout plans, under evaluation, moving through to this point. And if you're green on there, it's green for go. So that's quite important. And I think we'll circulate this to members as well, so you've got access to that. In terms of moving forward, up next is Deb Hughes. Deb's the service manager for outdoor recreation. What we're going to do as we move forward, everybody will move up this way. When we take questions at the end, we'll be around so you can ask us all questions about your relevant area.
Hello everyone, my name's Deb Hughes. I'm outdoor recreation manager for those of you who don't know me. I've got 3 team leaders at the back of the room, Shona Butter, Richard Knight and Mark Blount. They all have responsibilities for various aspects of the work that we do, and I'll run through that as we move on. Outdoor recreation manages a number of assets across the county. Basically the rights of way network, countryside parks and sites and green space, and we do that by working with communities at the local level. To talk firstly about rights of way, that map illustrates the density of rights of way across the county. We have actually 5,500 kilometres of public rights of way, footpaths, bridleways, byways, and we also manage a small percentage of what are known as unclassified county roads, and these are the tracks at the very lower end of the highway network. The work that we do is guided by the Countryside Access Strategy, which was produced in 2008, runs for 10 years to 2018. That strategy contains lots of actions in terms of improving access to the countryside. Basically, how we're going to improve the rights of way network, how we're going to engage more with local people. There's an ambition for a parish paths partnership in every parish. It also talks about how we are going to promote Shropshire as a tourist destination and how we're going to maximise the health and well-being benefits for access to the population. Alongside that statutory plan, we also have a number of quite complicated legal statutory responsibilities. I'm not going to go into a great detail on that today, but basically the nub of it is that we have a duty to keep all of those public rights of way open for public use. We have certain responsibilities with regard to maintaining access on that route, on those routes, and namely bridges is one of those, but also surfaces. We also have a duty to enforce that network, so where landowners aren't complying with their responsibilities as well, we have a legal process that we can go to ensure that that happens. So we also have a responsibility for keeping the legal definitive map of public rights of way kept up to date. So that is the legal record that really underpins all of access in Shropshire. So in terms of our maintenance responsibilities, we are responsible for signposting on the network and particularly keeping that network open and easily accessible. We have responsibilities with regard to bridges, as I said, surfacing, and keeping back overhanging vegetation. Obstruction on the network is probably one of the biggest complaints that we receive, and with regard to that, it's poorly maintained stiles, gates, and overhanging obstructed vegetation, as well as ploughing and cropping on the network. So just some examples of issues that we have to address. We get around about 1,500 complaints each year from members of the public who are out and about trying to enjoy the network, but inevitably they receive problems they have to go into. Keeping the network well promoted is another key aspect of the work that we do, and that's an area of Office Dyke, which is the national trail, not looking in particularly good condition in that particular side. We obviously have issues with regard to the weather. That was a bridge that came down in the last bout of floods about 2 years ago. 2007. Those are quite high cost jobs for the service to resolve. But we do that, and there's some before and after shots of a bridleway in Albury and Quat. Those that you know that area, there was severe localised flooding a few years ago. And some issues around Dronesley as well, so sort of before and after examples. Making sure that the network is well signposted is obviously clearly important, but also making it easier for people to access too. One of the initiatives that we've got is easier access, and the council has a policy on easier access across the county. We're not just catering for walkers, we're catering for a number of different users on the network, and that's Cardinal Valley, horse rider, going along Jackman Way, which is a promoted route. And again, making sure that landowners keep their routes open. That's a really good example of a footpath through the property. We'd like all landowners to actually do that. Working at the local level is really, really important to us. We do that on the Rights of Way network by promoting parish paths partnerships. Partnerships have been going for 20 years now. We celebrated our 20th anniversary with our volunteers this year. Parish path partnerships are people at a local level who are really engaged in improving their network, how they want them to be improved basically, so it's local decision making. Parish path partners can get involved in improving routes on the ground, they can get involved in promoting routes, they get involved in walking festivals, they get involved in creating circular walks and guided walks, etc. We support parish paths partnerships by providing training, support, advice, tools, equipment, direct help where it's required, but they do get involved in some quite technical issues. Putting a bridge in, for example, it's not an easy job. There's As I said, training volunteers is important, especially from the health and safety perspective. We need to ensure that our volunteers are working safely in the field. But we do have over 54 parish path partnerships across the county, and they do cover at the moment around about 100 parishes. And very often they're affiliated to local town and parish councils, so they're acting through the parish council in that respect and report to them. We do provide a small amount of grant to the parishes. They don't always ask for it. Sometimes they use it to pay for their own expenses. Sometimes they put it towards some funding that might actually end up with a promoted route in their area. Last year, Parish Paths Partnership helped us to carry out around 2,000 improvements on the network. Promoting high quality routes in the county is obviously important from a tourism perspective. So we do a lot of work around promoting walking in Shropshire as a tourist destination. For family-friendly walking, we're never going to be able to compete with the high scale national parks across the country. But it is recognised as a very family-orientated walking environment in Shropshire. You can basically do a short walk from a local village up to walking and rambling along for days at a time. So the promotion of access is important. Just an example of a number of leaflets we've produced and are still producing to really pull visitors into the county. We support this also via the Shropshire Walking website, which is our key promotional tool, where anyone can download leaflets for free. We also run a number of projects through external funding. This is the example of some improvements we made to the Shropshire Way in the south of the county. I think this is actually one of the website pages, so you can see it's quite high quality information that we're providing for people that want to come to Shropshire. And we also want to get everyone involved in walking, so producing something like this that really sort of pulls in the families to both our walks and on our sites is important to catch them young. We also support many of the market towns now that have walk as a welcome status. So again, helping them promote and linking in with local businesses in that respect. Managing that all information is quite a challenge. It's just a snapshot of our database, but it contains a wealth of information on most routes in the county. So basically, promoting the health and well-being benefits of access in Shropshire is important, and that's being increasingly recognised, especially for walking. And by doing that, we also actively support the many Walking for Health schemes across the county. We provide support in terms of training, insurance, national accreditation. I think we've got probably just under 50 nationally accredited schemes now operating, and about 350 walk volunteers, walk leader volunteers. So these are people that are trained up in the community to lead very specific health walks, and what we mean by that are short walks, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes up to half an hour. Some of the more established Walking for Health groups are now getting fitter, and they're now walking for longer times and distances in the countryside around where they live. So that's basically rights of way access. We also manage parks, sites, green spaces across the county. We have two what we would call country parks. Basically, this is one at Vermeer, and the other one is at Severn Valley Country Park. These are high quality visitor destinations with over 500,000 visitors each year between them, and they have a range of facilities, so toilets, refreshment facilities, play areas, etc. The big pulls into the county. We also have a number of countryside and heritage sites. So these are sites normally outside of urban areas where we manage access and carry out improvements to the environment for the locals and visitors alike. Woodville being one. These sites generally have, they're warm, welcoming. You can orientate yourself around the site. So people can basically turn up and just walk. We also manage about 120 green spaces and community sport facilities across the county. And this is an example of Birch Meadow in Broseley. These are basically used by the local community. They're normally adjacent or within the urban area, and people use them at that local level. This is an example of Birch Meadow, which is, if you don't know, it's a really good site in Broseley. And we manage the play facilities, trying to provide really innovative types of play on these sites. And we get children involved in actually the development of those play facilities. So where we've managed to secure some external funding to improve and upgrade, we engage with the local community, especially the young children, in designing their own play areas. We also help local communities organise events and days out on their green spaces, and organise quite a number of school visits across the county. Active volunteering on our sites is obviously as well increasingly important. Getting local people out and about, enjoying the health benefits of being outdoors and being active, but also obviously for us it's all to do with helping us maintain those assets at the same time. And supporting people, so this was a particular project called Shropshire Outdoors, which was engaging people with mental health problems actually get out on our sites and get active basically. So that's a very, very quick, brief run through Shropshire Outdoors, Shropshire Recreation. The challenge for us is, how do we manage with the current financial problems that we have? We have a number of initiatives at the moment, basically around driving down our costs. The first one is basically targeting our green space areas, high grounds maintenance costs, so basically reducing those costs and seeing if local people will engage with us more in terms of maintaining that. The second is our 2 country parks, so driving down our costs of our 2 country parks in the council, in the county. And we're looking at numerous ways of doing that. For example, those of you that know the Boathouse restaurant in Ellesmere, that's now been outsourced. We're looking at expanding the trust at the Mere to bring more partners in to help us manage that. And at Severn Valley, at the moment, is slightly different, in a slightly different stage. What we're looking at the moment is actually how we can increase income and drive down our grounds maintenance costs at Severn Valley. And the third area is basically how do we continue to support and in fact grow our links with public health on the active volunteering agenda. So basically for the future, what we're looking at in terms of that is growing Shropshire Outdoor partnerships, so extending parish path partnerships to link in with other active volunteering that happens at a local level. Increasing that active participation, so really supporting Walking for Health, which isn't core at the moment, but we are hoping in the future will become a core part of our work. Extending parish path partnerships, so really helping those communities help themselves with regard to rights of way access in the county. Help and support adult social care in terms of growing the number of more inclusive volunteering opportunities for vulnerable people. And generally supporting environmental volunteering across the board. And most importantly, ensuring Shropshire is a great place for people to live and to visit. That's a quick whistle-stop tour. I'm going to hand you over to Andy.
I'll give a link. Some key themes there that I think one of the interesting things is the partnership work that is done in Deb's area, but also just to re-emphasise that rights of way is a statutory function. So in terms of challenges for the future, we have to, as authority, continue to deliver a public rights-of-way service, so that's very important. So in terms of linking from statutory services, I'm going to hand you over to Ian Kilby, who's now going to cover development management and planning policy.
I'll come to why you put a de Havilland on the screen in a second, but most of you know me through delivering the planning service and the regulatory aspects of the planning service, which is in short the process of dealing with planning applications. But the full area of responsibility that I'm responsible for delivering includes some other statutory functions. It includes the plan-making, planning policy team. It includes the building regulations service, which deals with construction and the management of construction on the ground. And it also includes the land charges team and the local land and property gazetteer team. Now, the land charges team, you'll come into contact if ever you want to buy or sell a house. They hold a large amount of data about land and property in Shropshire. And the land and property gazetteer team hold a database that gives each property a unique reference number, which is of use to a number of other services across the council, such as council tax. And we're also responsible for street naming and numbering. So, in short, a whole range of statutory functions to deal with sort of land, property and development. Now, I don't really want to talk to you really about what we do, because I think you've got a fair insight to a degree. I'll tell you who the key leads are in relation to those areas. What I do want to tell you about is we've got a key series of regulatory functions, but the pressures that are facing these services and others you'll hear from colleagues are how we continue to deliver efficiently and locally. So it's more of a presentation about transformation. And that's why we've ed this on the slide, because this came out of my in-law's attic. And we've got 4 boys in our household, ages between sort of 7 and 15. And we asked them what that was. And it was interesting that, yes, they knew it was a plane, but they didn't know it was an ashtray. And that's really sort of saying that smoking, particularly, okay, I don't smoke, and it was Mrs. K, but the fact that they didn't know what an ashtray was, I thought was quite telling about how attitudes to smoking have changed. And it's that sort of process of where we are now with our statutory services and where we need to be, and changing and challenging perceptions that I just want to talk to you about. These are some of the corporate messages that have been delivered by the organisation. The biggest sort of, challenge for the public sector in the last 30 years, all bets are off. Scale and pace of change must reflect this challenge. And the priority is to deliver what matters to local people to create better public value, yet reduce demand. Now, we're doing that with a lot of our services in Shropshire Council. But actually, we don't want to reduce demand with a number of the services in Andy's area. We want to increase it. We want more development, we want more income, we want more investment in Shropshire. I suppose what we're trying to do with our areas is channel shift people so that their contact and their relationships with us are straightforward, simple and efficient. So it's making the interactions with our services as efficient and effective as possible. Now that's, I'm assuming I'm going to circulate this presentation because you won't be able to read that here, but those are the key manager leads in my service area. On the left-hand side, I've got Andy Mortimer, who heads up the planning policy team, so he'll be your primary contact for all aspects of plan making, planning policy in your areas. Ian Maddox heads up the building control function, building regulations. Tim Rogers is our area planning manager. Susie Jones is responsible for delivering the system, and I'm using that specifically to refer to our online presence because that's key to our success in delivering an effective and efficient service across Shropshire. So she's responsible for your email alerts on new planning applications, for maintaining the online planning register, for managing our web content. And finally, Claire Richardson deals with all of these sort of business processes, making sure that notifications go out on time, making sure that our relationships with parish councils are effective, and so on and so forth. Looking at planning first, I'll go through each of the key teams. We're a huge planning service. We're second only to Birmingham in the West Midlands region, dealing with over 4,000 applications a year. And we're twice as large as third place to Herefordshire. Now, okay, so what? Well, the challenge for us, as I've outlined, is how we continue to deliver that service effectively across geography, which is very much larger than Herefordshire and Birmingham specifically, particularly in the context of significant changes and cuts to the service. A number of you will have been involved with the recent work of the Task and Finish group, looking at how we deliver planning committees in Shropshire, and that is very much part of our process. To ask ourselves why we're here. Well, we're here in terms of the planning service to regulate development and the use of land in the public interest. We exist to facilitate development. We're not here to sort of get in the way of sustainable development, but to make it happen. And I think that's a message that sometimes gets lost. Many of our, I suppose, customers are looking for the planning service to arbitrate between often competing interests. Very often planning decisions are upsetting 50% of the people 100% of the time, because you'll have a number of objectives to a scheme, a number of supporters to a scheme, and so on. Planning fee income is a barometer of the economy, the local economy. And although it's been in decline ever since local government reorganisation, this year I can say it's 30% up on the same period last year. So if there's any evidence of green shoots, that's the first I'm able to tell you that we're seeing from a planning perspective. The shape of the planning service, well, planning policy as a team was brought into the wider planning service from April of this year. And the planning policy team is critical to delivering land supply and facilitating the community-led approach to planning that we've adopted in Shropshire. The development management elements of the service, those are the people regulating planning applications, the planning officers that you'll speak to fairly regularly, has experienced quite a significant process of cuts in the last 3 years. So up to this point, that service is reduced by a third, and the voluntary redundancy process will take another 13% out of that service. So that's forcing the change and driving this transformational process that I've alluded to. And our relationship, the officer relationship with you as members, is very important in delivering the success of that. Mentioned planning policy. Well, we've embarked on an approach which has embraced localism. The Localism Act sets out the approach that we're not huddled in a room in Shire Hall somewhere, drawing lines and on plans and sort of like saying, right, you can have 50,000 houses, you can have 10,000 houses. What we're doing, what we've done, what Andy's team has done, has gone out and met with local communities. You'll have been involved with this process, and asked the communities to inform and help shape the development aspirations in their areas. And part of the sell for that has been the community infrastructure levy, because the community infrastructure levy, which applies to all residential development in Shropshire, provides a mechanism for inward investment. That levy is reinvested back into local communities. And you know all that, but this does lead to some tensions, and it's leading to some tensions right now over the issue of land supply, because we are required to have a 5-year supply of land, and that position, let's just say, is challengeable at the moment. So how how that will manifest itself in planning decisions is that the planning officer, in bringing together all of the issues in relation to an application, has to say, ultimately, is this development proposal sustainable, compliant with the policies, the National Planning Policy Framework? And that sometimes will create a tension where the local community, through our localised approach to plan making, said, we don't want any new development in our area, thank you very much, we'd rather it be countryside, or we've set a value, we need about 10 more houses throughout the planning period. So the challenge will be when a developer comes forward with a site for say 20 houses or 30 houses, and that site is otherwise sustainable, compliant with the NPPF, but not what the community wants. Now we're right at this point now, so you won't have seen many decisions take place, or proposals come forward of that nature, but you will shortly. Building control, a team that's been under quite a lot of pressure, currently going through a restructure, as I say, responsible for managing development on the ground and making sure things stand up. And if they fall down, making sure that they fall down safely. They've got some statutory regulatory functions, but also some non-statutory work. We've got an in-house energy surveyor who provides advice on code for sustainable homes. That's an income stream that's non-statutory. And we also sort of publicise the work of the team through an excellence awards scheme. This room has been packed full of builders from time to time, delighted to receive awards for the success of their project. It's a good way of publicising positive activity on the ground. Now, as I say, the restructure is underway, and builder control has faced quite significant pressures because it has to balance its books. It's having to reduce its establishment because the income level isn't there to support the current costs, which is interesting because I've just said planning income's up by 30%. Well, it is, but it hasn't fed through to the construction on the ground just yet. So the planning process, I suppose, is at the front edge of the way. What building control is doing is looking at every way of maintaining its market share, because unlike the planning service, it faces competition from the private sector. You could set up, if you've got the right qualifications, and go out and be an approved inspector dealing with building regulations work. And in fact, a number of people that have left the council have done just that, and are now in direct competition with the council. So what the building control team is doing is looking at partnering with other councils. So they've already got a memorandum of understanding with Telford. So our team can go and inspect work in Telford and claim the fee, and their team can come and inspect work in Shropshire and claim the fee. Now that's done by agreement, and it's usually dependent on where the resource and capability is on each day. This slide, I think, sums up a lot of, in my mind, the problem with local authority bureaucracy. We're very good, I think, of putting in a lot of mechanisms and processes, and there may well have been good reasons for that a few years ago. But I've just been sort of clearing out my inbox because it keeps on crashing, as yours probably did, the number of emails you get. And I was clearing out my sent items, I was just saying to colleagues earlier, and the number of people that, they don't exist, they've left, they've gone. There are far fewer of us delivering the service. Therefore, we need to keep things straightforward and simple and effective. I suppose as well from a customer's perspective, let's not forget, they assume, I think a lot of things, particularly with planning, is a bit of a dark art, a bit of sort of alchemy. You put an application in, there's some people huddled in a room, something happens and a decision comes out. And very often they don't appreciate the difference between you as members and us as officers. It's just we're all planners taking decisions and something comes out. Now I think our role is to try and make that process as simple and easy to understand as possible, because that way you'll get some trust, potentially, and buy-in and understanding that it isn't a dark art, that decisions are taken in a robust manner in accordance with often national policy and guidance, and that informs the decision. The other aspect of it, this is just a couple of slides about transformation. This is where we've been. I've talked about the architecture of bureaucracy, and this is where we're going. We have now, in order to keep our level of capability, we've maximised the agility of our workforce. I'm sorry for this jargonistic approach. Effectively, we've given everyone the means to work from multiple locations, and they do. And therefore, if you want to reach a planning officer, the best way is probably to email them, because they could be at home, they could be at a hot desk somewhere, they might not always be at the office you anticipate them being. So in terms of agile and flexible solutions, this is on the left-hand side of the slide. Is Julie here? Julie Files? No. I'm assuming I'm going to circulate this presentation. You'll then be able to see what's on this. Effectively, we've identified a number of potential office locations on the left-hand side, which include home, out in the field, or a fixed office location. We've looked at the work that needs to be done. We've identified that certain things have to happen in a fixed place, like our back office functions, and certain things can happen out on the ground. And then we identified what equipment was required to do the work. We didn't go out and give everyone an iPad, because not everyone needs an iPad, but some people do, and others don't. And it was a fix between the process and the job role and the individual sort of preference that informed our process. The aim being that we don't want to be physically dependent on buildings. So if the council takes decisions about how and where planning function is to be delivered, we do not want to be part of the problem. You can't move us because we keep all our plants or files in that room, in that building. So the future's bright. Well, put a question mark on that. The future's brighter than it was earlier. We've got a positive response, I suppose, to looking at new ways of delivering the service. We're very much geared around customer-focused services, and you will probably know that planning issues can generate quite a lot of tension. I've said it should be simple and it should work. If we do that, I think we're more than sort of 50% of the way there. I've said also the challenge for us is to deliver efficiently and locally, and develop a culture with our customers, which are yourselves, which are everyone out there, that helps them help themselves. Think now, many of us bank online. Santander told me yesterday that was the last bank statement they were going to send me, because I'd elected to take emails and so on. I didn't realise I'd elected, I just hadn't told them otherwise, but I'm quite happy to receive email bank statements. We're having to, I think, look at those form of solutions that many people have adopted in other parts of their life for planning processes. That's just the slide I've put up many times that illustrates the tensions between delivering efficiently and locally, and expectations being raised by the National Planning Policy Framework, and expectations being, well, look, the government said you're going to give us more influence over planning decisions in our area. And I said earlier that there's likely to be some tensions arising with planning applications coming forward that might not be locally popular, but be sustainable in the context of the National Planning Policy Framework. The final one for me, I don't know why he's doing that, but it's also important to recognise in the service as a whole that we've got different attributes. We've got a large part of our processes are formulaic, like the sausage machine, and it's constant. And so we want that to be straightforward, accessible, easy to understand, and easy. That's why we're making, for example, household planning applications very simple to deal with. We're reducing the templates, the work involved for the officers to make it to release capacity, and we want to make it simple for applicants. But equally, there needs to be a space for the blue sky thinking, the problem-solving aspects of our work, the play-shaping sort of elements of the services that we deliver. So I'm going to leave you with him. He will stop when I'm hands over to Andy. So I told you very little about planning, but something about sausages.
How core statutory function within the council in terms of planning and delivering housing can be transformed. It's often a defence from members or even officers say, no, it's a statutory function, we can't look at it in terms of transformation. Well, actually, Ian's illustrated how we can transform something that's been seen as very bureaucratic, as long as you stay within the legal framework in which we have to operate. So in terms of improving the way committees operate, in terms of improving the way that actually we streamline reports, because officers love writing 30-page reports, don't they? And I'm sure you love reading 30-page reports, don't you?
Adore it, yes.
Yeah, you do indeed. Yeah.
That's very beautiful.
We're going to move on now to an area that's critically important to Shropshire. We pride ourselves on our rich natural heritage and our historic environment. I'm going to hand you over to somebody you all probably know very well, John Harrison, who's the Service Manager for Environment and Sustainability.
We're halfway through. I've got 10 minutes to talk to you about a very diverse team. They're the ones who actually provide all the specialist information that is needed to support most of the other parts of the council. So the environment group consists of 4 teams: natural environment, historic environment, sustainability, the A&B partnership. Last time I counted, there were 54 members of staff and a budget of about 1.9 million. 25% of it is externally funded. We've had it as high as 47% in the past, but we had more staff who were externally funded at the time. So I'll rattle on straight away into the first of the natural environment teams, tree safety. This isn't statutory, you'll be surprised to know, but we'd be bonkers if we didn't do it. Basically, tree safety surveys of all major highways, schools, outdoor rec sites for Deb and her team, landlord services, that's our housing and other council sites and facilities. We do the tree safety surveys on a cycle, schools every 2 years, highways 3 years, some of the outdoor rec sites 5 years, but car parks are done 2 years. So it's all based on risk. We give advice to the council, departments, the public, developers, agents, contractors, and we also deal with subsidence and other tree-related claims for our insurance team. And that's to prevent this sort of thing happening. Thankfully, there's a photograph from Shropshire. But you might be surprised to know that since 2000, 4 people have been killed on the county's roads in tree-related incidents. Thankfully, the last one was in 2007. That happened to be the managing director of Birmingham International Airport, who was killed in an unfortunate accident near Bridgenorth. If it had been the council's fault, we would have faced claims of £5 million plus. So the fact that we'd done all the surveys meant that we had a defensible position. So you can't always stop the trees falling down, you can reduce the risk, and if the tree does fall down, then we reduce the risk of the council being liable, and that's really the main aim of the tree safety surveys. Community trees, this will be something you should all be familiar with, tree preservation orders. There are about 40,000 trees in Shropshire with TPOs on them. There are about 100 woodlands that have TPOs. We're also consulted on planning applications and conservation area notices. All trees in conservation areas are protected in a similar way to TPOs. We also deal with hedgerow removal notices, and you will be aware of quite a controversial one last year where someone proposed to remove all the trees on their farm. Never known anything like it. We normally get about 10 objections or comments on these. We had over 600 on that particular one, some from national organisations. And high hedge complaints. Those are the things where you've got conifer trees growing on boundaries, and generally they are neighbour disputes. So we're the pig in the middle because the neighbours can't come to an agreement. So quite time consuming. They're the only one that we can actually charge any fees for. All the rest we are obliged to provide free of charge. We also do community work on trees. We've got the free tree scheme, now called the community tree scheme. Distributed 13,000 trees last year. The bulk of those are provided through private sector sponsors. We pay for tree guards and the like, and we do the distribution. There's a network of tree wardens around the county. There are also a number of schools have forest schools, and we do the tree safety surveys for those to make sure those sites are safe. And one of our more recent things, the government initiative, the Big Tree Plant, which we're carrying out in conjunction with Shrewsbury Town Council, and that's to primarily plant larger trees, so-called standards, about 150 of those a year going in at the moment. The other part of the natural environment team deals with biodiversity issues, and you'd think that these were all lovely, nice, cuddly, easily solved issues, that they are an absolute pain. Because most people, when they make a planning application, don't necessarily know that they have to do all the surveys, etc. And very often what the team spend their time doing is trying to find ways around the regulations to allow something to go ahead within the timescale, or actually break bad news to an applicant about what they have to do to actually comply with the law. And this is criminal law. It's not so it's an issue that is investigated by the police, and we have been called on to support West Mercia Police in their investigation of wildlife crimes in Shropshire. So it's always best to try to avoid these issues if we can, and we've got a good team of specialists who try and do that. We also provide advice to our policy planners. So on the right is a draft of the environment network, which is one of the policies within the core strategy, and we're working with neighbouring councils, because obviously Shropshire doesn't end with a cliff. It goes over into the boundaries with Telford, Powys, etc. So we're looking to extend those so there are proper networks going throughout the county. We also maintain and analyse a lot of the environmental data, and maintain the environmental data systems for the rest of the council. So a lot of the environmental data that's used by other parts of the council that's on the GIS system are maintained by the natural environment team. We also host a biodiversity officer who works with the Shropshire Biodiversity Partnership. That's 70 plus organisations, some statutory, but most of them entirely voluntary, and the Shropshire Environmental Data Network. Now that's all those, what should we say, specialists, I think we'll call them, who are interested in things like dragonflies and mosses and flies and spiders and all of those sorts of things that, to be frank, I'm not terribly interested in myself, but they provide us with all of the data that we need to inform the decisions we're making on planning matters and other things. It's just come to an end, but I thought I'd leave it in. Your Natural Heritage was a leader-funded project. It's been working with 13 parish groups, primarily in the north of the county at the moment. Lots of work on the ground. That's community groups going out looking at what's important to them in their communities, and actually then doing work to improve that. So we're looking to find funding now to continue that work into the future. We also do quite a lot of work with quarry companies, and a couple of weeks ago, based in Hill Quarry was in the Mineral Products Association Awards for Restoration. So I think that's a great credit to what the team have been doing, and that is again working with the minerals company, working with the local community in Baston Hill, actually getting volunteers out on land that's owned by Tarmac Lafarge, or Lafarge Tarmac, I think they call themselves this week, and actually doing, I think there's a community orchard going in there soon, etc. So all of those sort of things around peripheral areas of what these big companies want to do. We've got the Natural Shropshire website, which promotes Shropshire and its biodiversity, And when you come on to talk about tourism, etc., the vast majority of people coming to Shropshire don't come to go shopping. They go to go walking the hills, looking at the wildlife and looking at the historic environment. And that's what we're on to next. So again, the historic environment team is divided in two. There's the archaeologists. They provide statutory planning advice to both Shropshire Council and Telford and Wrekin. And the team also maintains the historic environment record, which is the data set that we build on for all of the things like schedule of ancient monuments and also the non-statutory, non-designated heritage assets that we have to take into account as well. Provide advice to farmers and landowners on the funding and management. Some of this we're paid for. We do management plans for sites like Briguntin. We've worked with the owners to do a management plan for them on their historic parkland. We also are a statutory consultee for all the farm environment plans. We receive a very small fee for that, around about £100 for every time we do one. We also do specialist surveys, which are externally funded. We've done the Farmstead survey, and we've also been sponsored by English Heritage to do archaeological aerial surveys for about the last 5 years, and we've got funding to continue for about another 2 years. That's a modern Bailey Castle near Kinnerley, with the, just see if that's it, so you've got the motte there, the inner Bailey there, and then the outer Bailey there. And this is actually on MOD land in the site. There's lots of these around. These were the first defensive positions that were set up by the Normans when they invaded. On the other side, you've got the building conservation team. They provide statutory advice on planning applications. They do the determination of the listed building consents. And at the moment, they're able to advise owners on the future of listed buildings and buildings in conservation areas. But unfortunately, our capacity to do that will diminish dramatically from March when 3 conservation officers leave. So we'll be down to doing statutory or paid for work only at that stage. We have in the past done training using traditional skills training. Many of you will be familiar with Colin Richards and the work he's done on that. And also, Shropshire is the best known English local authority in Romania, believe it or not, because of all the voluntary work that staff have done out there in Transylvania, etc. So much of that will actually end again when Colin leaves in March. Do fee earning work, specialist project management, for example. We're doing, we're managing the restoration of the Bishop's Castle Town Hall. Done all the design work for that, and we have in the past done television work, mainly things like Victorian Farm. You've seen we've been involved in every single one of those series, Wartime Farm, although we weren't always credited with the work. I think that's changed now. But again, we won't have capacity to do too much of that in the future. The A&B team, Shropshire's Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, designated in 1958. Around about a quarter of Shropshire is covered by a statutory designation. It covers, it's mainly in Shropshire, but there is a little bit up in Telford around the Wrekin. We host the team. We're not council members of staff. We host them. We put £40,000 of council money in, and that brings in almost £1 million of money from outside Shropshire, which is then spent within the county. There are a range of activity. They work on strategic policy. They provide grants through LEADER, etc. They are the LEADER advisory group for South Shropshire. They have rivers projects working on Clun in particular, freshwater pearl mussel, and the nutrient problems that are a constraint on development in that area. And they have other initiatives like the Buy Local initiative, and do various farming projects, doing things like getting farmers who are generally isolated, one-man bands who are isolated, not terribly sophisticated, haven't got broadband access, actually putting them in contact with people who can advise them and all the rest of it. And just started off Stapleton's Corndon project. This is a Heritage Lottery funded project across Shropshire and into Paris. It's the only one that actually crosses the border. And that's about £2 million coming in, and we put in £1,000 a year to bring that £2 million in. Sustainability, this is the bit you think is everything really. It touches on everything. It's truly cross-cutting. Deals with climate change, carbon management, all our statutory requirements and the carbon management, the carbon tax and all the rest of it, but that part saves us money. So you'll see here, this is a boiler house in a school, and all of this lagging has been put in. That costs about £2,000, payback less than 18 months. And the caretaker of the school said that you could switch the central heating off an hour earlier every day because he didn't lose too much heat within the boiler house, which is where you don't want it. Also do work on sustainable procurement, food and fair trade, Sustainable Schools Award, etc. Unfortunately, all of that will end at the end of March. We've lost 2 members of staff from the team already, and another one will be going. So we'll be down to just doing the energy work. We're doing some proactive work, so we've got photovoltaics on the larger schools, secondary schools in Shropshire. That's bringing us in around about 100 grand a year in income. So it's a payback of around about 15 years for that, and then with the last 10 years we get that £100,000 as profit for the council. And if you have any doubts about whether the climate is changing, a cursory examination of underwear through the ages will actually give you the answers you need. And on that note, I'll just finish. So the conclusion is we deliver specialist statutory services across all parts of the council. We work with a wide range of external partners and local communities, and we have large elements of external funding, and we do an increasing amount of fee earning work, and we're here to help. The other thing I'd say is that most of what we do is unseen, because we're doing things behind the scenes to support other parts of the council, be it highways, planning, economic development, emergency planning, etc. So you generally won't come across members of this team doing frontline stuff. They're doing the specialist work behind the scenes. Okay?
You might have a range of pants on the washing line and sausages. Ian's sausages, John's pants. Just remember those. We're moving now from statutory functions more and more into the non-statutory areas. However, I think what was important for this, we can put this slide up. While this is the visitor economy, there are areas of archives that are statutory functions, which I found fascinating. You hear a bit more about that. This was to be Louise Cross, which was service manager, but for one day only. Tim King's going to cover visitor economy, tourism side, and then Mary McKenna's going to do the archives and museums. That's okay. No, you're just fine. Thanks, Tim.
Good morning, everybody. I'm one of the 2 tourism officers in the council in the visitor economy team. Visitor economy is a fancy name for tourism, so the same thing. In our area, we have 3 main functions: tourism development, which is my area, Shropshire Museums, and Shropshire and Telford Archives. We call them the Shropshire Archives because they cover the whole of Shropshire, including Telford. The tourism sector is really vital in terms of economic activity and economic income into Shropshire. That's an annual figure, 501 million, based on 2011 figures. Nearly 15,000 jobs. And of course, the money that visitors spend permeates through the economy into shops and other services. I always used to quote the example of a Thatcher in Somerset, where I used to work, and I said to him, "Are you in the tourism business?" He said, "No, I'm a Thatcher. I do roofing." I said, "Well, sometimes you do roofing on pubs, and pubs are supported by tourism, aren't they?" "Oh yes." So he's actually a beneficiary of tourism. Some big numbers on numbers of visits, again, each year into Shropshire. The nice thing about Shropshire is that tourism isn't really noticeable. We don't have herds of visitor buses crawling around Shrewsbury. We don't have people waving their umbrellas with guided tours going down the street very often that you see. Tourism largely goes on unnoticed, which is nice. And it can't be sent offshore. The only offshoring we've got in Shropshire is when you push your boat away from the bank and get going on the canal. Tourism is rooted in the county, it can't be moved, it is here for good. Now, working in partnership with the industry is made up of all kinds of different people and organisations, from B&Bs, hotels, attractions, eating places, pubs, people who run guided tours, coach companies, transport, all kinds of things. And they're very disparate and very, would appear to be, kind of uncoordinated and not working together. Our aim is to bring them together in partnerships, so the council and the industry get round a table, and we've got these 4 area partnerships: Shrewsbury, Shropshire Borderlands, which is the north and Oswestry, Shropshire Hills and Ludlow in the south, and a new one starting up in the Bridgnorth area. One of our highlights in recent years was the Much Wenlock link with the Olympics, and we had 250 media visits, 650 articles published about Shropshire in worldwide media. We managed to gather together a pot of £1.4 million to improve the product in Much Wenlock and the surrounding area. One of the things we did was upgrade the museum. We had a £500,000 grant to upgrade the museum, which looks fabulous now. If you haven't been to see it, it's really good. And that 1.4 million pot of investment turned into £8 million worth of revenue coming into Shropshire from the visitors who came. So what do we do as a team? There's 2 of us in the team, Alison, Patrick and myself. First, probably one of the most vital areas we do, which nobody else does, is research and intelligence. And people use that in making bids for finance, using it to justify their business plan to the bank, and all kinds of different ways. Planning future developments. It's very, very worthwhile having lots of good, up-to-date research, and we get as much as we can. Trying to bring the industry together. The council has a unique role as if you like, an unbiased partner, an independent organisation that has some resources and has some people and can do the job that other people can't do. So we're often in this world called market failure, where the private sector can't deliver the things, so we pick up those sorts of things. And one of the areas, again, is getting investment in from external funding. We've had a lot of European funding over the years, Acton Scott, the Discovery Centre, various other things have been invested in over the years. And we have another stream coming, and Mark's going to talk about that in a minute, the next stream of European funding. Getting the industry together in a room is always exciting. We always get lots of questions and lively discussion. This is one of our annual tourism summits taking place. We can invest in photography, which people use. That's a really lovely shot of Ludlow in, I think, in the early autumn. But we have a fantastic photo library that anybody can use for free. Market towns are very much part of our product, and we work not only with our town and parish councils, but also with our community regeneration colleagues in helping to improve market towns and their viability. Now, moving on to our museums, Charles Darwin was one of the early donors of books to our museums and our collection. And we've been collecting stuff for 175 years, so you can imagine we have rather a lot now. Some of it sits on display, some of it sits behind the scenes. But our job is to conserve it so that we pass it on to future generations. And we hold those collections in trust for the people of Shropshire. We want to use them as an asset. We want to use them as an economic asset for people to come to the county and see them and enjoy them and hopefully spend money while they're here. They're assets, as I said, they're facilities where people can understand their own sense of history. So it's about being a Shropshire person. You know, what can I go and see and learn about the history of my place where I live in, or where I grew up in. And the people who come to see our museums generate £4 million into the local economy. We have fantastic programmes for education, which run from the smallest child until the oldest pensioner, right across the age groups. And we also support all the other museums in the county. and we have a lot of voluntary individual volunteers and groups that help us delivering our service as well. Education, 11,000 children, plus many more thousands adults and groups coming in. We have visitors who come in to go on our courses at Acton Scott. More pants, I'm not going to getting on with pants. You can see, learning to be a Victorian child at Acton Scott. And of course the service produces the material they're using, and we make sure that we're actually matching the curriculum. And obviously the government is changing the curriculum from time to time. So we need to keep up with our relevance for children's learning. A very sort of strange little thing we do is reminiscence boxes, working with Age UK. These go into old people's homes, care homes, and they do help people who have dementia or Alzheimer's. And it's quite a useful sort of therapy, if you like, of looking at how life used to be in the old days, having practical examples. These are our 4 main bases at the moment. Acton Scott, down in the south of the county, in Church Stretton, Much Wenlock Museum, Ludlow Museum, and the Shropshire Hills Discovery Centre, which is not a museum but is an exhibition centre that is your gateway into the Shropshire Hills. And our new flagship is the Shrewsbury Museum and Art Gallery, which will be opening early next year. It's showcasing not only Shrewsbury's heritage but Shropshire's heritage as well. It operates on 3 levels. On the ground floor, it will be open to everybody, free. There'll be the visitor centre, shop, the cafe, reception, and then you pay to go into the museum, which is upstairs. And we've got this vast 5 buildings to explore in the museum and gallery. And then upstairs again, we have a 3rd level commercial lets for meeting rooms and education suites and offices as well. So it really is going to be the first port of call to visitors coming into Shrewsbury. The Visitor Information Centre deals with many thousands of people in a year. The VIC service across Shropshire deals with 500,000 visitors a year, so it's one of the council's largest services. We're going to have special programmes aimed at all sorts of different sectors and different types of people. We have grants from the Heritage Lottery, which mean we have to make sure that our outreach programmes meet every section of society, not just the people who are going to pay the £4 to come through the door, but everybody who is living in Shropshire and hopefully coming into Shropshire as well. And we need to raise as much revenue and income as we can. Shropshire Archives, Mary Mackenzie is
Thanks very much. I'm just going to say a little bit in a bit more detail about Shropshire Archives. We've already heard from Tim about the importance of the collections that we hold collectively. Well, within the archives, we have about 5.5 miles of records. I think that's 9 kilometres in metric. And that does cover 1,000 years of Shropshire's history. So it's a huge collection that has been built up over the years. We also manage the records, we operate a records management service for Shropshire Council, so that's looking after the records that need to be kept for a limited period and then usually destroyed. So as Ian mentioned, the paperless office I think is a little way off. Obviously we are moving towards using electronic media, but there still is an awful lot of paper that needs to be stored appropriately and then retained or destroyed according to legislation. I've just put up, there's a picture there of one of our sort of records, that's from Much Wenlock, that's a 17th century record, just to give you an idea of some of the challenges of managing records. That's all from a court. Those bits of paper were just put together, put on a string and filed in the 1650s, and they never thought that in 500 years after we'd want to be looking at those. And just to untangle those and make them accessible to the public is obviously quite a lot of work. We're fortunate that we have a lot of volunteers who work with us. At the moment we've got a Heritage Lottery Fund which is supporting about 350 volunteers across archives and museums. And we're also moving into virtual volunteers now. This is with some Arts Council funding. And the idea with that is that if you're in Australia and you've got an interest in Shropshire and you'd like to help us do some work on collections, you can log into a website and you can do a bit of cataloguing or a bit of research for us. And that's just starting off now. And I think that's going to be a really exciting way that we can move forward. The online presence for us is incredibly important. We have a joint catalogue that's online and it covers archives, museums. It also includes the historic environment record that John was telling us about, and that is really a great first stop for anybody who's interested in the history of Shropshire. We've already heard a little bit about education work. What we find is when school children come into the archives, it's that thing that it's real. So much of children's lives is virtual. These things really are 500 years, or if you're going to the museum, millions of years old, and that really does get them going, which is fantastic. We're also able to get our collections out there. We've got a wonderful exhibition at the moment, which is in the theatre. This is some shop fronts of Shrewsbury from the 1880s. A guy called Joseph Della Porta went round taking photographs of the shops, and we've got a fantastic collection. So as I say, they're in the theatre at the moment till January, and they're also in the Old Market Hall. Family history, you probably know, is really big and seems to be, there's no sign of it waning. Alexander Armstrong was the guy who came in to research his family history in Shropshire as part of Who Do You Think You Are? And as I say, the family history thing keeps growing. We're just going into partnership with Find My Past, who are one of these commercial websites. They're going to be hosting Shropshire records, and we will get a royalty in terms of the use that they get. So that's going to become a really important source of income for us. The record should be going up early next year, and that will really transform how people can access the records 24 hours a day. You won't have missed your attention that next year is the beginning of the centenary of the First World War. Wilfred Owen is obviously an iconic figure for us in Shropshire. Myself and Joy Durrant, who works with the Art Service, are coordinating activity across Shropshire, looking not just 2014, but all the way through to 2019. We've put in a couple of funding bids to the Heritage Lottery and the Arts Council, and if those are successful, that will really help us take that forward. We've got about 50 organisations who are already engaged with that process. What we're looking at is really the home front as well, and how that impacted on Shropshire, not just the soldiers who went to war. And I think it's back to Tim.
Just to finish off this little section on the visitor economy team, we need to manage our collections very well, and that might involve loaning them out to other people, but we don't want to just have them sitting in warehouses where nobody can see them. So that's quite a challenge actually. We have a statutory duty to look after them, but it'd be lovely if more people could see them. So we want to be a bit more enterprising and commercial. We need to raise more revenue coming into the service. We have some really key visitor attractions that support the visitor economy in Shropshire. As we see, we've £4 million coming from people just coming to our own museums. So it's vital that we see those going forward well. We want to support the community who are very keen on their local museums, places like Clun and Bridgnorth. Oswestry is another good example, and I'm sure more will open in the future as people become interested in their past. And then we're an education resource for not only the young people, but for every generation really. And we're always looking for new funding opportunities. We've heard from the Arts Council. They've just funded a £100,000 promotion of Shropshire using museums to project the county around the world really, following on from our success in Much Wenlock. We've got virtual volunteers. We're doing lots more with the Arts Council, the various lottery funds, and our next phase of European funding offers us really exciting opportunities with nearly £100 million available. Mark will tell you more any second now. Just to give you an idea, it's passing on those skills down the generations is one of the key things that I really like about this, this service, is maintaining that knowledge and passing it down. So we obviously face the same kind of budgetary limits that other services are, but we think will have a positive future. So thank you for listening.
Okay, good morning everybody. I think you all, I know most people here. Mark Hamilton, I'm the Service Manager for Business and Enterprise. I put in brackets Economic Development because that used to be our old name, and I think a lot of people are still more comfortable with that name than Business and Enterprise. Just about the service a bit. We're fairly small. There's 20 of us, although 15 are kind of funded by the council and 5 externally funded. And the total kind of controllable budget is about 600,000. So I suppose, given that economic growth is like a top priority of the council, I suppose the first point to make is that we are like a little ginger group, as I call ourselves, i.e. we're there to kind of stimulate everybody across the council, and even wider than that, to take economic growth at the heart of everything that they do. So it's through partnership, and everybody that's spoken today and elsewhere across the council is key to economic growth. We're just a small group that has that kind of name. Okay, how are we broken up and what kind of drives us? Well, I put there the economic growth strategy because really we are non-statutory, and what's at the heart of everything that we do is making sure that we're aligned with the private sector and the businesses out there, because obviously we can't create wealth fundamentally. We can just get the conditions right to help the businesses to create those jobs and the wealth. So the economic growth strategy is right at the heart of that, and this is from 12 to 26, and we spent a lot of time really last year working very closely with the private sector for the first time ever, I think, and lots of people have been in touch with us about this. The private sector really determined what that growth strategy is, because they are going to deliver it as much as we are. So I have kind of 4 teams, and I think you'll know probably a lot of these here. Paula Rogers, who is the head of the kind of the team leader for external European funding. Caroline Reed-Smith, who looks after business support and investment, and Chris Hill, who does the infrastructure and growth. That's like business partners, business units. And then we have the Marches LEP coordinator, and I'll say a lot more about Marches LEP as we go through, but really everything now is around the LEP, and that's us working with Herefordshire and Telford and Wrekin. So whereas in the past, I think we would have seen ourselves as being out there and taking on the region or nationally, now we're very much a LEP, and funding comes via the LEP, and we mentioned about the European money, £98 million of new European money, which we're hoping to get as much of as possible into Shropshire. But we work as a LEP dealing with that money, so that's out as an allocation to the LEP. And the same with the future local growth fund, that will come to the LEP as well, and we will bid as a LEP to get that money. Okay, there are 4 clear priorities within the economic growth strategy, and I'll go through each of those in turn. As I've said, one of the things that we've done very hard in Shropshire is to make sure that our businesses are very involved with everything we do, and some of you here will have been to the business summit that we hold every year. We get about 130 businesses there, and the last couple of times we've used it very much around developing the growth strategy, and then the last one it was all about the action plans, which are the way that that's being delivered, and that's being championed by individual businesses, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So the first priority is accelerating business growth. And with the banks not lending principally to a lot of small businesses in Shropshire, one of the key things has been finance for business, and I'll leave it with you at the end, which is the kind of finance resources that we try and make available to businesses. So we have been quite successful at getting money in from Europe, for instance, to do that. So we've got about £2 million, which is called the Business Enterprise Fund, which we get out to small businesses. And then we have our own bank within Shropshire, which is the Loan Fund, which we partly finance along with an institution called Impetus and some European money. And those are just 2 examples, but we have a lot of things that we try and do to help businesses access money. I put single point of contact there, something that I think most businesses in Shropshire would say is very good from what we do as a council is, they do provide a single point of contact. So when they come to us, they don't get passed from pillar to post. They actually get a service from the person who deals with them. So whether it's a bit of environmental health, a bit of highway, a bit of planning, a bit of wherever it is, we try and bring it together into seamless service. So the business doesn't know there are different bits in the organisation doing it. It's actually just one person for that business. And I think that's worked particularly well. I put Invest in Shropshire. We do quite a lot on trying to promote Shropshire as a place for businesses to come to. Now, inward investment has been a bit slow over the last few years, obviously with the recession, but we still get quite a bit of interest with people approaching us and saying they would like to invest in Shropshire, but also we have to get the quality that Shropshire has to offer out there on the website and out to investors right across the world. And we work obviously not just ourselves, but through UKTI, UK Trade Investment, and tomorrow we've got a major visit from the Chief Executive of UKTI who's up here, and we're encouraging them to promote us even better across the world and bring more investment. Just mentioned 2 action plans there that businesses are driving in the business board. I just mentioned 2 because it's quite interesting: procurement and export. And Johnson, who's the chair of Federation of Small Businesses, who's on the business board, has really driven the procurement agenda. And I think we can all be justifiably proud that by working with businesses, this council now procures about 65% of all its contracts and all its business with local businesses with a postcode in Shropshire, and that's one of the highest in the country. And then in terms of export, we're trying to double the level of export by companies in Shropshire, and working with the Chamber. I put this as an example of the Business Enterprise Fund, which I mentioned before. It's quite a nice example of Air Covers, which is a small business out near Wem, which some of you may know. John Pattinson, the MD there. And through the Enterprise Fund, they've got this amazing scanner, and that's a scanned picture of a helicopter. So what they have to do is they make covers for helicopters. So when they're on aircraft carriers, or they're out in the desert, where obviously seawater and salt will just destroy the working parts, they need a very, very effective cover. But in order to match the cover perfectly when they sew it up, they need infrared kind of scanning to make sure they pick up every single point of the helicopter. Well, through the Business Enterprise Fund, we 50% funded a big new scanner for the company, and it's enabled them now to get new contracts in the Middle East. And that's just a small business out in a barn out near Wem. Excuse me. Infrastructure for growth, which is Chris Hill's area. I mentioned business parks there, and I've got a few pictures coming up. But you'll know that someone else mentioned, I think Tim mentioned market failure. In Shropshire generally, it's very difficult to get the private sector just to invest on their own. So over the years, the council has tried very hard to make sure that every single market town has a good level of business park or business units, particularly starter units. And through that, it's meant that we still have, a fairly good self-containment in a lot of our market towns, where people are working where they live rather than having to commute. So we've got quite a good number of business parks and a good number of starter units. We've got about 190 business units for small startup businesses, and at the last count, they're supporting about 400 jobs and about 200 businesses. So it makes a real difference, and I think within supporting businesses, if at the same time there are premises for them, you can give them some help with finance, and maybe you can give them some help with business planning, then their chances of surviving are far, far greater. And obviously it's much easier to help your businesses survive locally than it is to try and attract new ones in. We mentioned the flax mill. I mean, one of the big successes of the funding team was gaining Heritage Lottery Fund and ERDF. That was £23 million of external funding for the flax mill. Without those bits, the flax mill would still be dormant and not going anywhere. And I think, as a very small, relatively small council, those are amazingly huge and complex funding bits to obtain those. I've mentioned the SUEs and new schemes. We're obviously constantly on the lookout for how we can get new employment land to cover, the needs of the future. And Chris works very hard on the SUEs and the employment part of those. And we're obviously looking at new schemes in Ludlow and Oswestry at the moment. That's just a picture of the next phase of Tern Valley in Market Drayton, which again, we've just got a planning application coming forward now with the chosen developer there. So there will be offices coming to the front of the park and some new business units, small business units at the back. So that's the next phase, which we put the infrastructure in and chose a developer to work with. So that's going to be a success coming on. This is just a picture of Ludlow Eco Park. And obviously we just have the next phase of Shrewsbury Business Park. So again, we're doing the phase, we call it phase 2B, which is the bit from the Wenlock Road, kind of where the park and ride was. And again, we hope that through that, we'll generate another 600 jobs for Shrewsbury. Okay, the next priority of the growth strategy is stimulating growth sectors. And we've mentioned, I won't cover tourism because obviously that's within the visitor economy area, but these are the ones that we feel are our key selling points. And we put a lot of effort into those because we feel that the food and drink manufacturing sector, for instance, is the one where we've got so many natural advantages that we can take on the world in food and drink manufacture. Same with creative and cultural industries, particularly now with superfast broadband. We've got some brilliant small companies there, and they're going from strength to strength. The green and low carbon economy, we've now got about 2,000 or 3,000 lead companies, and some of the lead consultancies in Shrewsbury are, you know, global brands, Enviros and people like that. And the same with the land-based and tourism. So what we try and do is concentrate our efforts on the winners, because you can't back everything. You have to try and go after where you've got a real competitive advantage across the country. That's just a picture of one of the companies. Then the last priority that we've got is a skilled and loyal workforce, because however much you do in terms of trying to get the infrastructure right for businesses and get financing and business support in, and we support about 2,000 businesses a year through our business support. That's kind of giving free clinics to businesses and so on. And through that, equally, in terms of that support, we find that, you know, the latest survey showed that the majority of companies, or a higher percentage of companies within Shropshire, are looking for support from councils, and they look to accountants or bankers, because we do provide completely impartial advice. And I think that's greatly valued, because we're such a small business economy. You know, 95% of our businesses still employ fewer than 5 people. So in terms of the skill side, it's really important for us, and we've been trying to boost the number of apprentices. And last year we had an enviable position where we got to about 770, I think it was, apprenticeship starts in the county. So that's been a real big push, and we've had that being pushed through the business board. And then the AG, trying to get the university presence for Shrewsbury and for Shropshire, is currently one of the major projects that we're trying to push through the business board as well, with Chester University. And we know that, you know, with 2,000 students, if we can get up to 2,000 students, the economic impact will be about £60 million to the economy of Shrewsbury. So we know how important it is, the whole economy, if we could get a university for the town. Okay, future challenges. I mean, I just said, I guess the biggest challenge has to be the fact that we have got a huge amount of money, potential money to use within Shropshire through to 2020. 98 million, as I said, of European money, and then there is £2 billion a year to bid into for the local growth fund. So that again is something that we will do through the marches there. New infrastructure developments to boost growth. It's a challenge always to get enough capital to do that. I mean, the capital programme for the council is limited, so our challenge is to use small amounts of capital from the council and try and match it with much bigger pieces of capital from Europe and from other funding sources, because constantly there is a need to develop new infrastructure and to see business parks growing, but also the town centres gaining new jobs. Last year we had some pretty impressive job growth. We're talking about green shoots. Shropshire actually generated 4,000 new jobs last year, better than nearly any other part of the country in terms of their respective size. So we're very pleased at that. But obviously, again, however well you do, you always think, well, how can we match that again the following year? And I've said we've still got key economic weaknesses, which we do have. I think as an economy, we still tend to be a low-wage economy, and we still haven't got all those knowledge-based jobs. So I suppose our challenge constantly is how do we get jobs that are more graduate jobs, that are more those highly skilled ones, rather than losing people to Birmingham and other areas where people are going after those jobs. I think the other thing is preserving the environment at the same time. Whatever we do, we must maintain the wonderful environment of Shropshire and keep that quality of life, whilst at the same time obviously generating as many jobs as we possibly can, and obviously having new housing.
Obviously, Andy did say the best for last, or at least we like to think so. I will promise that I will be short and sweet, not me personally, with my presentation. But unfortunately there won't be any pants or sausages involved. So apologies for that. Theatre services operate Theatre 7, the old Market Hall cinema, and the square in front of the old Market Hall. Theatre 7 opened in 2009, so we celebrate our 5th birthday next February. It's a very mixed and varied programme, as you'll see from the brochures that I handed out earlier. Anything from dance, drama, comedy, musicals, lectures, you name it, we probably do it. The most important part of our programme throughout the year, and the biggest part of our programme, is our pantomime. It's been a fantastic success story at Theatre 7. In our first year, we played to 26,000 people. Last year we played to 35,000, and we're anticipating and hoping for 36,000 people this Christmas, which is probably around about the 90% mark. So unless we extend the run beyond, or further into January or February, we're sort of reaching our limit. We also have a very strong community part of the programme. Lots of organisations use us as their home. We host their events. This week's a very good example. Last night, or yesterday, we had 2 performances from Topaz Dance School, both playing to full houses. And this week, an organisation called Get Your Wiggle On are presenting, which is Eastwick. So if you're interested, it's on from Wednesday. That's a nice sight for a theatre manager, a pretty full house, which we do often get. That, unfortunately, is empty seats and not a good sight for theatre manager. However, it does illustrate the spaciousness of the theatre itself. It's got a great sense of light and airiness, which is not apparent in all theatres, particularly London theatres. We next come to the OM8, the Old Market Hall, an ancient monument, but it was converted, or the top part was converted into a cinema and cafe. One side is the cinema, one side is the cafe. It's only an 81-seat cinema, but it's very intimate. In fact, that's one of the selling points. We think we have 2 fairly unique selling points. One is its intimacy, and the second one is we don't sell popcorn. We're not trying to compete with the Americanized cineworlds of this world. It's celebrating its 10th birthday in January. I wasn't around when it opened, but I am told that there was actually great opposition to it being converted to a cinema and cafe. There was some who thought it would make a very good wool museum. I'm pleased to say that it was turned into a cinema and cafe, and in fact the opposition soon changed on its opening, and it has become a very much loved part of Shropshire. I hear people talking about my OMH, and they're not the staff, they're the customers. They really do appreciate what we do there. Between the 2 venues, we're actually selling tickets for nearly 1,500 performances. The OMH will generally have 3 shows a day, and of course there are 2 spaces within the theatre, the main auditorium, which is 650, and the Walker Theatre, which is 250. So throughout the year we're trying to sell tickets for 1,500 performances. So marketing for us is the key. I think we're very strong at it, and we need to be to sell the tickets. This is our new website, one of the methods we use, another being the brochure you have in front of you. We also use direct mail, we also use e-shots and press releases amongst our selling tools. This, which everyone's got a copy of, is a door hanger. On the back is a space for an address, a label. We'll be sending out just over 9,000 of those today in the post. The idea being it'll land on the doorstep and be picked up. It's not in an envelope, it's a postcard. Hopefully the children will see it, they'll use it on their doors, and that will hopefully sell us an awful lot of tickets. And a very good example of using different tools for marketing. This one, obviously, there is a cost to that. There's the cost of the design and the print and the cost of sending that out. On Friday, we went on sale for a show comedian, Greg Davis, who's the Shropshire's comedian, who's originally from Wem. We decided that we didn't need to spend too much money on the marketing, so we sent an e-shot out to people on our mailing list who had been to see comedy shows before. It's about 3,500 e-shots. Cost us £9.50. A little bit of time to design it. Within 10 minutes, we sold the first tickets. Within an hour, we'd sold 76 tickets. And by lunchtime on Saturday, we'd sold half the house. We also did send out a press release, which again cost us nothing, which we did manage to get a very tiny little article, but that's all it needed, on the front page of the Shropshire Star. So for £9.50 we sold half a house, and I suspect by the end of this week we'll be completely sold out. So it is a very, very important part of our operation, and one we are actually very proud of. We also operate the square in front of the OMH. Lots of different events take place there, charity events, commercial events, and we offer the technical support and administration support for the square.
I'll jump in straight with two questions about what you made. One to yourself on the broadband. You said 93% coverage. Was it you covering broadband? Or is it
Fortunately,
he?
I know it's still Andy. I'm right there, yes.
he's the king man.
We do still have the same problem in the centre of Oswald Street that we've had for 15 months now. With the broadband system covering English Walls, Smithfield Road, South Road, Lex Street, Blackgate Street, Oswald Road. It's all come down to the unit and its location, and we continually having the same problems with BT, who come back to cancel blame as soon as we interpret and so forth. When is this going to be rectified? So that's question one. The other question was to Bev, which was reference the walkways and so forth. I did a quick calculation and I estimated a footpath about a metre wide. Every 2 miles we're losing an acre of land. Does that get taken into consideration? Do the farmers get any constant compensation for this? Or is there any concerns with livestock? I know when we have cattle on the fields, people can walk through because cattle being curious will walk up to people, and that can cause problems as well. So there were the 2 points. I want to go that.
We can take the broadband first then.
Yeah, absolutely. So Oswald Street at the moment is part of the commercial footprint. So BT are currently rolling out fibre broadband there. Obviously our programme is very much about what we call the intervention area that I'm sure probably Andy picked up on, about 72,000 premises around the whole of Shropshire, and there will be isolated pockets in Oswald Street that will form part of our programme. So we've obviously just recently announced where we're going to. It's obviously split down into 9 phases in Oswald Street. At some point we will be looking to obviously pick up some of those holes that commercially the current provider has not picked up. So I suppose the first question back to yourself is, have you checked on the postcodes that are relevant as to where you're part?
I think one of the problems is the present location was outside NatWest Bank.
Okay.
And also in Oswald Street we have the Sainsbury's, we have the Iceland, we have other supermarkets.
Yep.
Now they have their own Ethernet systems.
Yes.
The banks have their own Ethernet systems. But the local shops and the local residents in town
Yep.
do not. And that's what's causing part of the problem.
Okay.
They don't see it as a financial viable transition to it. I think we need to be pushing it because businesses do need to push it.
I absolutely agree entirely, and that's a big part of the programme. I mean, with regards to a cabinet that's outside NatWest, I know that there was a contentious issue, wasn't there, with regards to that particular cabinet. I know it's back actually in the commercial programme, so it should be part of the delivery for spring of next year. But if you wanted to take that offline, contact me with the actual postcodes of the premises, and I'll make the inquiries for you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Deb, in terms of the footpaths question?
Yeah, in terms of compensation, the answer is no. These are historic rights of way that are legally recorded and the public have a right to enjoy them. But there, yes, farmers do receive subsidies with regard to their land and their use, and ensuring that those public rights of way are kept open is a condition of part of that subsidy. There are things that landowners can do, so if a route is very inconvenient, they might want to consider moving that route, and there is a legal process to do that. Onto a line that's maybe more convenient, so not straight across the field to approach a crop. So, that's the situation with regard to that. So what was
The livestock.
the livestock?
Livestock are very curious. They can't help it. They wouldn't urge you, but they're very curious.
Yes, and some people were bothered by that, and a landowner, as any landowner, has their own sort of health and safety liabilities with regard to that. And there is advice from the health and safety executive on actions that you can take to protect the public and protect yourself. It's a difficult one because it's that balance between an enjoyable countryside and actually working with the land. So it's a difficult one to sort of resolve in that respect. But just to say, the landowners have their own responsibilities, as does a member of public enjoying, a right of way. So, one of the issues we found, especially with livestock, is dogs accompanying them. One of the worst things you can do is probably have a dog on the lead in that sort of situation. So, it's not one that you can easily answer.
Question, and then we've got to look at this one next.
Thank you. Both John and Mark, interestingly, mentioned the environment as being critical to development. And I was particularly actually interested in the way that Mark talks about right at the end, because in a sense, he realises, I'm sure, as we all do, that the environment is actually the goose that lays the golden egg in terms of why people come to Shropshire. So, John, you mentioned that I think that in terms of the historical environment, which is the area I'm particularly interested in, but I'm sure it's the natural environment is just as important. I think you said Colin Richards was leaving, is that right?
Yeah.
So who actually do we have in the historical environment team to focus on this aspect of development?
Well, what we've got at the moment, we've got Colin Richards as the historical environment manager, and we're planning to replace him with from within the team at the moment. So that
you are planning?
We are planning to replace him from within the team and then say himself elsewhere. There are then two other conservation officers who will be leaving and won't be replaced. So we're going to have to redistribute the work to other members of the team, which means we won't have the capacity to give the free advice that we've been able to give to owners of historic properties in the past. We'll do what we can, but obviously it's a capacity thing. We haven't got the capacity to just offer the free advice we would have done. We're also in the position where two of the members of staff will actually, over the next 3 years, have to become, these are two additional members of staff, have to become entirely self-funding. We've already got an archaeologist who's entirely self-funding, and we have one of the conservation officers, the one who's managing the restoration of Bishop's Castle, Town Hall, etc. He will become self-funding in the future as well. So we're under considerable financial pressures. So we are actually having to retrench to what our statutory minimum duty is, which is to process the listed building applications, to advise our planning colleagues on matters relating to conservation areas, listed buildings, Schedule H monuments, etc. Apart from areas where we can actually get income in to expand.
I've got a couple on the previous one. Can I ask Ian? Parish councils get quite confused. National Planning Framework, strategies, and then we start to talk about neighbourhood plans, local-led plans, parish plans, and all the rest of it. What do you expect, require, want from the results of parish council work on parish plans or community-led plans and what input do you want them to go into a wider neighbourhood plan?
Well, neighbourhood plans, there are a number of these emerging across the country now. They vary actually quite significantly in their scope. If you look at one of the first plans to be published was in Eden, in the Lake District, one of the most sparsely populated areas in the country. It set out just 6 or 7 core aspirations, and one of them was broadband actually. It didn't go down into lots and lots and lots of detail. And I think that's always, I say, it's easy for a community to get involved in a lot of detail. So the right level, I suppose, is in a neighbourhood plan. It shouldn't include anything that conflicts with the core strategy or the Shropshire Council's planning framework. It can add value in terms of providing local intelligence. That meeting we had in the south of the county at Clipbury, I think there were a couple of plans circulated or discussed at that meeting where they were talking about village design statements and identifying local detail. That's something I know that would be of interest to Andrew. So it's something that identifies what is special about a place, that helps the decision taker arrive and the applicant arrive at acceptable solutions.
Sorry, just to clarify this, because I'm being asked this question all the time. To be perfectly honest, I don't know how to answer it with any certainty. Parish plan used to be the name, then it was community-led plan, then we had neighbourhood plan. What weight is given, whatever name there is that a parish community produces, is there a different weight you give to those three? Or would you regard it all as so similar that virtually they're the same?
You know, there are differences. Yes, you're right. The language has identified all of those terms from time to time. Neighbourhood plans that have gone through a proper process of consultation, and I think these were sort of brought about as a result of the Locals Act, the idea of the neighbourhood planning per se. And we've got Much Wenlock as the first sort of block of neighbourhood plan that's gone through a sort of formal process, the formal process in Shropshire. They will be part of the development plan framework. Whenever we've delivered planning training sessions, we say all decisions have to be taken in accordance with the development plan unless material planning considerations indicate otherwise. So the neighbourhood plan, if it's gone through that proper process, is part of the development plan. So Eden's neighbourhood plan is part of the development plan, has to be taken into account with planning decisions. Stepping away from that, in Shropshire we've got, you may have heard the phrase neighbourhood plan light being used from time to time, which is a Shropshire developed approach to providing neighbourhood plans. And Kinnerley was the first of those in Shropshire to do that. So the point is, they've been properly consulted on, they are given weight, but it's those that have gone through the formal process like Much Wenlock one, which is part of the development plan. Parish plans as well are also useful in informing decision taking, as are village design statements and so on. But the key with all of these things is consistency with the development plan, the core strategy, and the level of consultation. It can't be just parish council, there's a plan, off we go.
No, it's community.
Yeah, so hence community-led planning. But Andy Mortimer will give you a lot more sort of detail on that. If you've got communities in your area that are interested in this, if you give Andy a call or email him, he'll help you.
As Mark knows, I'm very much interested and support in every way economic growth, and certainly that's happening down my way against some opposition. I accept that absolutely. The LEP funding, I'm not quite sure how much Shropshire will be able to get, bearing in mind we've got Hereford and Telford and Wrekin. We certainly heard on Saturday that Telford and Wrekin vigorously opposed the various things. However, Is it true that the new homes bonus that the government is giving is now going to be given to the left? Is that a fact?
Well, what happened was when Heseltine did his wonderful work, leave no stone unturned, and he was passionate about trying to make growth happen in the economy. His belief was if you free up localities and give them resources to do it, it'll happen. So he was trying to persuade government to come together and bring a load of money together from all the bits of government and have it as a kind of single pot that then could be used by localities. And that's what originally was called the single local growth fund, although now we tend to call it the local growth fund because it's not really particularly a single pot. And they went around trying to find money to go into it. And as usual with central government, it's amazingly difficult to extract money from the different departments. They all kind of put their toes in and their claws in and they try and stop it. And a bit of money that went into that single pot was new homes bonus. But there's been a consultation out on it, and an awful lot of local authorities are up in arms, generally across the piece really, because what it was rather like doing is we'd already budgeted for new homes bonus, and in effect what government's done is said you can bid for money that you already had. So you are right, I mean that's in a sense, that's the position at the moment. We're still to wait because the local growth fund doesn't go live until, in effect, after the election, because it's not timetabled in until May 2015. So although it's been announced, we don't actually get our hands on the money until really, or the biddable money until after that. So the work we're doing at the moment, which is the Strategic Economic Plan, so in other words, we're working with Telford and Hereford at the moment with consultants as well, to try and put together a really strong bidding document called the Strategic Economic Plan for the left. And if we can do that, we will maximise the money, but we do know that obviously this is, we've got to get it in, we've got to get it approved, and all there's a whole process.
Yeah.
The money will not actually come out to us until 2015.
Just to clarify that, you're right about the homes bonus going towards the left, but it's actually top slice is 35% of what we take in terms of Shropshire will be going into the left, not all of the new homes bonus. So it's going to be 35% of what's secured in Shropshire will go into the left, and the same for the other areas. I've got one question at the back and then one at the front. Before we move on to those questions, I know a few members are drifting off. There is an evaluation sheet that's circulating. Please feel free to attach £5, £10 or £20 or generously received. We take the question at the back.
Just throw a nick at that.
Easy, please.
Or a sausage.
My question covers a number of areas. Much has been said about the statutory and non-statutory services that Shropshire gives, has provided, will provide. Business plans for each department were due to be published at the end of September. We were told it's going to be last week, still haven't been published, but will the business plan show for all the sections, departments that are here, what Shropshire Council will be proposing to deliver in the next 3 or 4 years, statutory and the non-statutory services? Heard that some of the services are going to be reduced.
Yeah.
How will we as members be told about it? Will it all be in these business plans that we will be able to scrutinise and look at? Because that's what the scrutiny committees are going to be looking at in the next month, 2 months, looking at them in detail. And it's interesting to hear the wide-ranging and how and what Shropshire Council will be able to do in the future.
Okay, then if I take that question. As I understand it, there'll be directorate level plans. There'll be a business plan at the directorate level, which will provide an approach on the medium-term financial plan, which will see us from 2014 through to 2017, which will set the budgets from the 1st of April 2014. And as I understand again, in terms of the process, the plans have been produced and finalised this week, and they go into directors' meetings. They will then go to scrutiny committees, then to go to cabinet. I think is it November cabinet, November the 16th thereabouts, Steve? Is it not done?
Well, where it was going is November the 13th, which is 9 days' time. And what chance there will be to look at it before then? I've asked questions about everything running a month, 6 weeks late. Will the cabinet decision, or will the cabinet still be deciding it on the 13th? If the cabinet is deciding on the 13th, it's going to be very little time for members outside to have a look at it, to ask questions how it's going to affect some of the sections here, because some of them may not be statutory services, but it's services that we have people back at our ranches still want and need.
Yeah, still I feel it's important. I think in terms of, I know what's going in terms of the detail from our area, and those statutory functions are picked up in those documents. But in terms of transfer, Steve, I don't know whether you can add anything more in terms of the process.
Not a lot I know, to be honest. It's coming through mid-development, but what will be an interim process, so I don't know.
But I know, what I do know is that there is a process to take that through scrutiny committees before it goes to cabinet.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed this one, this actually.
It was good.
There's an awful lot to take in.
Lots.
And it's just to skim over the surface. Presumably we will get an email of what's been covered today.
We'll make sure it's available. Email might be difficult because we tried to email us around, and because there's so many images, so we'll find a way that we can make it available to you. I'll speak to Julie Fowles. Julie.
Put it on Councillor's Corner.
Is that okay? Councillor's Corner?
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Because and obviously together with that, it means we've got a little bit of contact details with it.
Good, we'll do that.
It's just welcome to go on. When changes have been made.
That's a really good point. So the presentation will be available on Councillor's Corner. We'll also make available the contact details of all the presenters as well. So if you want to follow up in any more detail, you can go directly to the service managers.
I hope we've got two very short questions for individuals too. I think you said in your presentation that there would be a £4 charge for going to the museum and or musicals.
Yes. Sorry, subject to approval by Cabinet. Because Cabinet approves all the charges that council services make.
I mean, obviously that Raleigh hasn't charged previously, and I think I'm right in saying that Bushwell hasn't, when I've been to it, has. I don't know about Ludlow, but will there be a difference between the different museums in that case if the £4 charge is brought in? We're charging here, we're not charging the other museums, and that's why I'm
I think it was the intention that we were going to be free. But because of sorry, I think it was the intention as we were developing the museum that it was going to be free. But because of the financial pressures that we're facing, then I think a charge was agreed. Am I right, Andy?
That's right, yeah, that's the approach.
But just for shoes, not for others.
Not for
It'll be
others.
different.
There's a charge at Ludlow.
There are other museums that do charge.
Yeah.
I mean, Acton Scott charges.
Yes, I know that was some Discovery charge.
Discovery
Talked about
charges.
the low and Webbush.
No, as I say, the museum one in sort of the town, the intention is to charge, but obviously it's got to be agreed. It's a proposal at this point in time, and it has been researched moving forward with the process. I mean, originally Tim is correct. The idea was we were in a different setup, we were in a different economic climate, and actually now the intention is to actually make as much as we can possible to actually protect what we have in Shropshire. In other words, get as many pieces out of the museum as we can and retain them for the future. So that's the intention. I need to chat it through if you want to.
No, the other question was about the archives. You mentioned that you're going into a polish of the finite pass.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's an exclusive arrangement with them, or will individuals still be able to visit the archives and do their own research?
Oh, well, yes, the information will still be freely available at the archives and across libraries, because as part of the agreement with Find My Past, there will be free access in venues. So all libraries across Shropshire and indeed Telford Review and at the archives will have free access.
So it's easy if people are just...
Yeah, but if you want to get it online, that's when you pay.